Hey guys, this is Jake here at Canadian Cutting Edge, and we've got a Tangram knife for you today, designed by Dirk Pinkerton. I've got another knife of his that I'll be reviewing to this March, May, April, May, June. Next month in June, I'll be reviewing another one of these, not too late in June, it won't take that long. This is I'm going to call it a small to medium size knife. My hands are large, bordering on extra large, and it's just a tiny bit small for me for most uses, but sometimes you want to have a small knife, and I can have full control, 4-finger hold with this knife, even though I'm calling it a little bit small. So it's not a super small knife to be sure, but it's not, big in any stretch either. This is a 3.5 ounce knife that has a lot of good features that I think you're probably interested in. And even if you're not interested in the style of this knife, I think you're interested in some of the technology. I'm going to be explaining something about pivots that I've never talked about before. So I think you're going to want to stick around for the review of the Orion or Orion. I'm not sure how you're going to want to pronounce it. Orion sounds much better, doesn't it? By Dirk Pinkerton and Tangram, which is Kaiser. Stick around. The first thing I want to mention is it comes in, I think, a couple different colors, and this color is hard to describe. I think it's fairly accurately represented in this video. If you look at the edge here, it's got very thin layers, multiple layers of predominantly this color, and then this sort of, I don't know, it's almost a brownish purpley kind of color. Which is how you get all these different tones, throughout the handle, depending on exactly how deeply they milled. And so at this transition point where it seems to, change angles, the color changes a little bit. It's a weird color, if you ask me. I don't find this color super attractive, but maybe somebody else will. I don't know. It's totally up to you, isn't it? But the blade shape and everything, I love stonewashed. We've got a nice saber grind here. That's a flat grind that comes up most of the way. A little bit of a swedge up here. Was it Tangram that's calling this a drop point, or was it a different vendor? I'm calling this a sheepfoot because, it comes down on a curved blade. I reserve the name Warncliffe for if it's got a straight edge blade. It's, knives are so subjective, but, so as long as everybody knows exactly what we've got here, we've got a gentle curve on the belly all the way down. And, some are even going to call this a reverse tanto, but I'm calling it a sheep's foot. And like I said, you've got the stonewash, you've got the model number put onto the blade right there where my thumbnail is, just where my pinky is now. And there's the steel type JPN for Japan Akuto. So this is the Akuto 440 steel. That's got a Rockwell hardness between 58 and 60 when it gets hardened. And a really good steel. This Japanese steel, I really, really like it an awful lot. It's nothing like 440, the American style. 440C, that 440A, 440B, that series. It's not like that. It's a different series altogether their own. We've got some really funky jimping, and I'm going to show you a close-up of that. If I can get this shot. There we go. There's this shot. As you can see, the spine is solid all the way back, and then we've got these little notches taken out on either side. And it's actually very comfortable for the thumb, and it really does add a lot of good grip. And we've got the same kind of jimping back here. Well, not the same kind, but same spacing for the jimping back here. So there's some jimping back here at these 3 pillars for the open pillar construction. So those 3 hourglass shaped pillars, work very well. Did it need 3? Nah, 2 would have been sufficient, but it looks really good. And then we've got, I didn't mention before, this is G10. Maybe I did mention that before. But now let's talk about the pocket clip. We've got a fairly small pocket clip. There's 2 screws here. These are Torque T6 Every other screw here is T8. But notice these little holes? It's a 4-way pocket clip. I have not had a 4-way pocket clip knife on this channel for quite a while. And, you know, the other knife by Dirk Pinkerton that we're going to see in June is also made with a 4-way pocket clip. That knife's called the Progression, and we'll see it then. But, you know, that's really good. Having a 4-way pocket clip, that's going to make all the lefties at least a little bit happy, although the liner lock will always be most easy to use in the right hand. But it's not hard in the left hand either. Not for somebody who's used to, you know, taking care of knives that way. So that's a good thing. I like this knife being basically very ambidextrous. We've got some skeletonizing on the liners here. Actually, let me take it apart, and I want to show you that. I've seen it on some other knives before, and I've sort of made mention to it in the pivot, but I want to show you when they mill out a raceway for the ball bearings, how useful and beneficial it is. So I'm going to show you some close-up shots of that, and I'm going to show you a little bit of a picture to help describe exactly how that works and why that's a good thing. So you saw the still pictures of the raceway, and by the raceway, it's this little milled out line that we have right in there. And that milled out line is for the ball bearings to sit in, and they sit down in that recess. And we have it on the blade as well. And the benefit of this is that when it's together, you got a very, very firm hold on it. The ball bearings are contacted in much more of the surface, and it just works better. It's more efficient, more stable. It's a much better way of doing it. Now, let me show you. Here's a drawing of how most knives are done. So there's a liner, and there's a blade, and the ball bearing sits between the two, and it's a tiny little contact point between each one of those. And, you know, so the blade moves, and, you know, the ball rubs on one tiny spot. Now, on this system that we have here, we've got these little recesses, these raceways, you know, milled in not only into the liners, but onto the blade as well on both sides. And no, it doesn't get very weak because of this, because, you know, it's a circle here. You still have an awful lot of steel here going all the way through. It's off of scale, and, you know, what I've done is I've taken this look, and if I cut it in half like this, cut the steel off like that, and focused on just one tiny spot there, looking at it in this orientation. And so the ball bearings ride in that little raceway, that little nest, if you will, both on the liners and on the blade, and that makes for much smoother action. It makes for tremendous stability for both blade plays side to side, and simply for sliding around. And it's a super good way to do it. Is it more work? Yeah. Is it more cost? Yeah. But they're doing this on knives that are $42. Much more manufacturers need to start doing this. I've seen much more expensive knives that don't go to the work of doing this. And this is a very responsible way to make a knife. This pivot system is going to last for a very long time. You can snug up the pivot system when you put the knife together, and you can be sure that it's going to work very smoothly. Have you ever had any of those knives where, you know, once it's together and you start, let's do it this way. Just imagining. And when you're sliding the blade open and closed, you can feel the ball bearings rubbing. They go boom, boom, boom. Very slight little bumps as you're going. That's because, you know, of this system. If there's any tiny little imperfection on either side of the steel, or maybe the ball isn't perfect, you know, and it just feels kind of weird, this system here is much, much better. And I haven't really explained this before. If you've got any more questions about this, I'll try to explain it. Just email me, or you can ask in the comments as well. But this system is an awesome way to make a knife, and they've done it on budget knives. Remember, Tangram is made by Kaiser, so they've got people on staff there that know what they're doing. Okay, so now that we've looked at the insides of it, and hopefully you've been impressed by how it works, let's talk about all the dimensions, and we'll zoom in for that. Cutting edge of 8.1 centimeters, 3.2 inches. Blade length, so handle to the tip, 8.4 centimeters, 3.3 inches. Blade thickness, 2 3/4 millimeters, which is 0.108 inches. The blade depth is 2.6 centimeters, which is 1.04 inches. The thickness of the edge behind the grind right there, very good, 0.45 millimeters, which is 0.0175 inches. I love having a nice thin edge, and a Akuto 440 can handle that very, very well. The grind angle is just under 20 degrees. It's about 19 degrees per side when I measured it, and that's really good. I saw a knife made with Akuto 440 on a listing, some kitchen knives made with Akuto 440, and they were sharpened to 10 degrees per side. And that tells you something about how good this steel is. If a kitchen knife maker is happy to make it at 10 degrees per side, you know, that tells you a whole lot. Let's keep going. The handle length, 10.3 centimeters, 4.06 inches. The grip area inside here is 9.2 centimeters, 3.6 inches. The handle thickness, it's 1.18 centimeters, which is 0.46 inches, so it's narrower than a lot of knives, so I'm not counting the pocket clip, of course. And then the handle depth, it's biggest right here, 2.4 centimeters, that's 0.95 of an inch. The total length of this knife with the blade deployed is 18 3/4 centimeters, which is 7.38 inches. And that shows you again that it's on the smaller side. How much does it weigh? Well, it's 99 grams, 3.5 ounces, as I told you before. I got mine from Amazon. That's the only place I can see right now, but Amazon has it for $42 US. And I will leave links for Amazon below. If I find other links where you can buy it, I will leave some of those below as well. If you buy it from Amazon, that's a referral link of mine. You'll be helping my channel out while you're helping yourself to a really good knife. So consider using my Amazon links if you would, please. How much is $42? Well, as of May 24th, that equals $54 Canadian, or almost 36 euros and just over 31 British pounds. So that's roughly the price that you're going to find for this knife, and it's a really nice knife that way. I really like the lockup on this. Lockup is totally solid, and it's nice and early, but not super early. I'll show you a close-up of that. Blade alignment, when it's closed, is perfect right down the middle. The edge, leading edge for this knife is super sharp. The tip is fairly thin, so it isn't a super strong tip, but it's a super delicate tip in the sense of for precision. If you need to do, a little bit of precise cutting, you can get your hand in here like this. Actually, I'm going to zoom back out. You can get your hand back here like this, or you can even pinch up a little bit and do some precise stuff if you need to. And that tip is awesome for that kind of thing. The different grips, it's very comfortable in variety of grips. Like I said, my hands are large, bordering on extra large. That's between 10 and 11 in the European sizes for gloves. And you can see the handle sticking out right there, and it's still very comfortable. So this suits anybody with hands that are large or smaller. Men's large. Extra large, you still might want it for some certain kind of use if you want a small knife. The sharpener's choil, I forgot to mention that before. It's a very deep sharpener's choil. What's a sharpener's choil good for? If you haven't heard me before, that's for when you sharpen the knife, you're not going to come up and sharpen into the ricasso and start to damage this edge right here where the blade gets thick again. It helps keep everything nice and neat and clean. And when it's a deeper sharpener's choil like this, that means you can sharpen the knife many more times as the steel recedes, before it disappears. So I like the sharpness tool, very good. One thing to watch out for, though, is sometimes when you're cutting certain things, the thing that you're cutting can get caught in there, so you have to be careful with that. And what else do we want to say in here? I mentioned the skeletonizing when I showed you the inside of the knife. The screws, not only are they, T8 and T6, but they are good quality screws. They fit the driver quite well. Let me show you my T8 screwdriver right here. And when I put it in there, there's very little wiggle room. It just is a nice snug fit. So that's a good thing. You can see my thumb right here where these letters are. It moves just ever so slightly. And you've got a pivot that only has screw on one side, which is really easy to take it apart and adjust it if you needed to. You shouldn't need to do very much adjusting. I really like this jimping that I mentioned before. It's cool and it's effective. I mentioned some of the other things. What are some of the cons on this knife? Well, it's slightly difficult to unlock the knife. If you look at it this way, usually this handle scale on this side is cut out a little bit extra to get your thumb behind there to unlock it. And on this Dirk Pinkerton design and on his other one that I have of his, he's not very generous with giving a lot of cutout here. So you have to be quite sure with your thumb that you're getting in there. And sometimes I'm not always sure if I'm unlocking the liner or not. But as I've gotten used to the knife, I've gotten used to it. But when it was brand new, I was, going like this, going, man, am I unlocking it or not? Have I pushed far enough or not? And the other thing is, since the liner is the same height there, I've pinched my skin a little bit sometimes because I've been pressing down. And then when I'm pressing down, some of my thumb goes in that space right there. Into that space right there. And then I move the liner over and it gets pinched in there a little bit. That's easy to remedy simply by taking a little bit of sandpaper and sanding back the G10 here very, very slightly. Doesn't need much at all. Very, very slight sanding right there takes care of that issue in case you come across that and you want to do something about it. So that's a very minor negative, but it is a negative. Even though it's 3.5 ounces, I think they should have done more skeletonizing and some on the other side and brought it to even a lighter weight. That would make it even more attractive. So it's not heavy by any stretch, but they could have made it even lighter for its size. And the blade tip. Some people are going to think that that's a negative. They're going to want a stronger blade tip. So that's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Some people really want a very precise thin blade tip, and other people want a very robust blade tip. So you take your pick. You know what you're getting if you're going to buy this. So just be aware of that. So it's not a negative in and of itself. It's just something that you should be aware of. I really, really like especially the steel that they keep using at Tangram. That Akuto 440 is great. I love that pivot. Awesome with that raceway in there that I explained earlier. I really like the lightness of this knife. It's a really good size. Oh, I didn't show you how low it sits in the pocket, so I got to show you that as well. But very, very nice knife. And the branding is not super dark and it's not large. I like that. So a lot of good positives about this knife. Now let me show you how it looks in a pocket. Before I show you the pocket clip, let me show you how well it cuts from the factory. This is very delicate paper. Well, not very delicate, but quite delicate. It's also gotten quite humid and wet, and that's why it's tearing a little bit. But trust me, this is very sharp, and it's cutting very, very well. I've used this knife for quite a while, and it still has the factory edge on it. I have not stropped it or anything. So now let's show you how it looks in the pocket. So here it is, put in with a tip-up position. So there's very little knife sticking out, less than 1 centimeter, right close to 1/4 of an inch sticking out of the pocket. Very adequate, very easy to pull out without being too easy. So it works just fine. So there it is. What do you think of this knife? I like it. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe and all that. I look at all the comments. I unfortunately don't have time to answer all the comments. If you definitely want me to see a comment, if you want to talk to me about something, email me at CanadianCuttingEdge@gmail.com, and I'll get back to you on that as soon as I can. A big thank you, especially to my Patreon supporters. We're almost at the end of the month, and on the end of the month, I give a knife away, and who knows, it might be this knife. To one of my Patreon supporters, if you give $2 or more per month, you're on that list to enter that draw of getting a free knife of good value. Not one of my cheapest knives that I reviewed, but one of the good knives that I reviewed that month. And I think this guy's going to be on that list. And if you don't want something this size, you know, we'll work out something else for you, whoever you are, you Patreon supporter who's going to win this. Remember, guys, always cut towards your chum, not your thumb.